She put a pot on she hair and gone. Them a the first one out on the dam. Basket on she head, bucket in each hand. Hold up on she frack, I wanna she grandson. To the market, them a go. For the morning, the day is dawning. For Kakakro to give the villagers a warning. Rise and shine, the birds them a sing. All animal take turn as them join in the waking. Kakakro, Daga.
All right. Good evening and welcome to Anansi Web Education. My name is Mark Benchap, and with me, as always, is President David Arthur Granger, the president of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana from 2015. I know if I was in your class, if you would have failed me right away, pronunciation of Guyana. Good night, sir. How are you?
Good night to you and your viewers and listeners. I'm happy, however you pronounce the name of my country. I think both you and I are proud of the land of our birth, and we're happy to bring this program into thousands of homes every week.
Thank you so much. I deliberately do it sometimes, the pronunciation of Guyana as either Guyana, and people oftentimes try to correct me about their correct pronunciation when I say
it is important because there are actually several Guyanas, right? The Venezuelan have Guyana, G-U-A-Y. There is some geographical feature called, the Guyana Shield, G-U-I-A-N-A. And there used to be a Dutch Guyana and a French Guyana, which is now called Guyane, Guyane Frances, Guyane. So it is good to know your country because our Guyana is Guyana and there's no other Guyana like this.
Absolutely. Guyana. All right. Good night to all of you. If you're listening in Guyana, good night. The folks in Blackbush Polar, the folks in Linden, the folks at Philippi, the folks at Alness, the folks at Auckline. Oops, did I say Auckline there?
Yes, Auckline.
Good night to everyone, even those of you outside of Guyana. Good night to all of you. Tonight on Anansi Web Education, we'll be dealing with this topic here, the PPP hooliganism. Oh yeah, the PPP hooliganism. You guys are well aware of that, the hooliganism by the PPP, and we'll seek to explain the PPP's disorderly public behavior, its disrespect for the rights of others, and its total disregard for norms of civil social conduct. Exactly. Oh yeah, that's what they're all about. And so tonight's program, it's about the PPP's hooliganism. First question, President Granger, what was the cause of the PPPC's hooliganism on Thursday, the 19th September 2019?
Well, the date is very significant, but it is just one part of a continuum, it's one part of a process. It didn't start on the 19th of September, it didn't end. It was just one link in a chain of events. In my view, I would say that the wheels started to turn long before 19th September. And I can go back further, but let us say that at the local government elections in November 2018, the PPP clearly decided that its performance in the local government election confirmed its strength in the rural NDCs along the coastline, and the majority was quite impressive. And the PPP had obviously made arrangements with somebody in the Alliance for Change, and they decided to bring a no confidence motion. It wasn't a casual or whimsical decision. They felt that they had support, but even some people don't even know what the no confidence motion was meant to discuss. And in fact, the person who actually voted, the AFC member who actually voted alongside the PPP, just a few days before, had actually praised APNU's performance in Region 6. Actually praised what the AFC or the APNU was doing for his so-called constituents in Region 6. So what happened, if I can look at the series of events, first of all, you had the local government elections, and the results convinced the PPP that they should try a thing, to use Guyanese expression. And so it was just like 2 or 3 days after the election results were published, after local government elections, that they suddenly brought this motion. It wasn't something that was long, in the offing. They brought this motion because they felt that they had a man who was going to work on their side. So we have to go back. Don't start in September 2019. Go back to November 2018, in the wake of the local government elections. 3 months after that, you have to follow follow the trail, the trend. Babu John. Babu John is very important because that is the scene of an annual rant. And it's a no-holds-bar rant. And as you know, the General Secretary of the PPP had to be investigated because of some expressions he used at Babu John. So 3 months after the matter came before the Parliament, there was another rant at Babu John, another fierce rant at Babu John, in which there were threats against the AFC. So that was the second stage of the campaign. That is when he used words to the effect that the villagers should chase out the president and the prime minister from their villages, walk behind them and chase them out. I'm not making it up. That is what was reported.
And if we can just pause for a quick second to show that you're not making that up, because in fact that is what he said, and he was actually charged for some very dangerous statements made. Here it is.
Right across Ghana, when the ministers of Granger or Nagamutu come here after the 21st of March, you say to them, walk behind them, chase them out, they're going to be illegal. Say to them, you're illegal. Free up the country, you're undemocratic. They're going to...
It's his words indeed.
Yes. Okay, so that was the second link in the chain, the Babu John rant. And every year, there's a rant. There's a rant. The third link in the chain was now the 19th of September. Again, this is a very suspicious date to choose. One is that why did the GMSA suddenly choose that day to invite the president to address them? Two, how did these hundreds of PPP supporters know that that was the day and that was the place to be? Three, why did the chairman of the election commission choose that day although the chairman had been approached in January 2019, that was the day that the chairman decided to write the president to state that elections could not be held before the end of February. And in fact, it turned out that elections were held on the first working day after the end of February, which is the 2nd of March. So you also had there afterwards, in March 2020, the 6th of March, the notorious 6th of March, after the elections were held, I said that's another link in the chain. When there was, the 5th of March, there was a chaos in the Region 4, District 4 command center of the Guyana Election Commission. And as a result of that, the PPP went to the High Court and got an injunction prohibiting the regional, the RO, the returning officer for district number 4, from declaring results or announcing results. And on the 6th, the school children were stoned. So all the links in the chain. After the 5th of March, you then had 5 months of tension and unease in Georgetown. So the thuggery of the 6th of March, stoning of the school children, was all part of a chain. To come back to your question, therefore, why why was what was the cause of the hooliganism? The cause was that it was part of the campaign to remove the APNU by any means possible. That was the basic justification or the rationalization, and that is what we need to know. It was one link in a chain of 5 or 6 events. It was a continuum. You cannot take each incident by itself. The PPP, since the local government elections of November 2018, set out on this plan, which eventually bore fruit on the 2nd of August 2020. So that is the story, the causation behind the hooliganism.
Thank you so much for that. Good night to those who are now joining us. We're dealing with the PPP hooliganism, disorderly public behavior, disrespect for the rights of others, and its total disregard for norms of civil social conduct. Next question. Why did the PPP mobs choose to create an uproar and disturb the GMSA presentation, which is what we're seeing here happen in front of the Pegasus?
It's for the cameras. It was all for the cameras. It was all to publish to the world that, and well, to start with, they wanted to intimidate Guyanese. You don't see any green shirts in that crowd. And no self-respecting member of the APNU or PNC wanted to be seen, close to that mob. So that was one factor. The other factor is that the PP wanted to demonstrate its strength. It was intimidatory, and they wanted to catch the cameras and let the world see that this is what they were capable of doing. They won the local government elections, and they weren't going to sit down in their NDCs and have meetings and try to develop the NDCs. They wanted to show that they were strong and powerful, and they went on the street because PPP doesn't have a tradition of demonstrating in Georgetown, but they tried a thing, and they went onto the streets again. They showed their mobilizing ability to pull people from the East Bank and West Coast and East Coast, and they created quite a mob in Georgetown. And then they selected certain ministers. Well, when you look at who was outside and who was inside, you can see that they sent persons. I don't know the basis of selection, but some people were not even on the scene. But they sent certain ministers, people who later became ministers, into the room where the presentation was taking place. So in the event there were any arrests or violence or tear smoke or shooting, the masterminds stayed well out of range. And they sent, as in the case of fools rushing where wise men failed to tread. And again, you want to know if this whole thing was concocted. And they decided to invade it because they knew that there was a GMSA presentation. I don't know, perhaps the GMSA was asked to hurriedly put together a presentation to draw the president away from State House or to draw him away from the office of the president and put him in a place where he's exposed. So it all could have been part of a conspiracy or some concocted campaign. And they just wanted again to catch the cameras, and they went in there, and the grown men. I mean, this is Form 2 misconduct, pulling out placards and misbehaving. You can't imagine that, grown adults would be behaving like that. But it's this is the type of thing that happens in the PPP to soften the brain when people are so insecure that they have to do as they're told. So I think they chose to have an uproar. They chose to disturb the GMSA presentation. A, because they knew they could get away with it, and B, because I think the GMSA knew that they'd be coming in and that no guns would be fired, and the police certainly didn't know. So it was a well planned operation. And I wouldn't go so far as to accuse the GMSA of complicity, but the GMSA did apologize to me personally, and they did make a public apology. But by then, the damage had been done. Um, and what was happening is that on that day, it was announced that, or the election commission did announce that the election could be held. So the coming together of all these factors, you know, even if you were an innocent person, you cannot help but feel that this whole thing was contrived. That, the crowds suddenly appear, the GMSA, suddenly invited the president, the election commissions, suddenly make this announcement, and the PVP leaders are there. It's all too good to be true, and it probably is not true that it was a coincidence.
Sorry. Thank you so much, President Granger, for that. As we move on to the third question, who in the PPP was responsible for instigating and orchestrating the PPP's hooliganism?
Well, there were several acts of hooliganism, and the most visible were on the 6th of March 2020 and the 19th of September 2019. Clearly, the presence of the PPP General Secretary and the presidential candidate on the 19th of September indicate that they were part of it. They knew what was going on. They weren't taken by surprise. They weren't going jogging on the seawalls and they ran into this crowd. They went there to be part of a protest demonstration. And because of their seniority, they have to bear responsibility for the consequences of their action. And the people who turned up there in the red polo shirts had to know what they were about. So responsibility is the PPP's. This is not some gathering of civil society, human rights association. This is a PPP show. PPP leaders were prominent, and the persons who were sent into the auditorium of the Pegasus Hotel were agents of the People's Progressive Party, and they had to be sent there on high authority. These were not low-level persons, from the street. These were people who later on were selected for ministerial office. They were ministers before 2015, and they were ministers after 2020. So I would say that responsibility for instigating and orchestrating the hooliganism has to fall squarely on the shoulders of the PPP leadership. And as I said, it is not one event. It was taking place over a long period, over a continuum. And I think that's exactly what we saw, that this is part and parcel of the PPP's. I would say you got to go beyond conduct. Conduct you could isolate as a single event or an episode, but when you see it happening over a period of 5 years, it is character. That's the PPP's character. Go on the street, create terror, create public disorder, and this is a serious matter, because when you talk about what happened in this street process, you're talking about breach of the law. There is something called the Public Order Act. So when somebody decides to have a street protest like this, they must consider what the law says, that anyone who at a lawful public meeting, this is what happened in the National Assembly in 2017. at a lawful, well, what could be more lawful than a meeting of the National Assembly? Anyone who at a lawful public meeting acts in a disorderly manner for the purpose of preventing or transaction of, preventing the transaction of business for which the meeting was being called together. So MPs' misbehavior was a breach of the law, a breach of the Public Order Act. And then you had again the public terror. This public terror is what happened on the street outside the Pegasus Hotel. Anyone who in any public way or public place, public way means the roadway, or in any theater, court hall, lecture room, or any place of public entertainment or instruction of whatever kind, or being unlawfully in any place, not public, wantonly does any act with intent to cause terror to any person or persons. So this is a breach not only of the Public Order Act, it's also the breach of the the Summary Jurisdiction Act. And when you look at those two acts, in fact, everybody there on the street or barging into the Pegasus ought to have been prosecuted for breaching these two laws of the country. So coming back to your question, those persons in the PPP hierarchy in the Central Committee have to bear full responsibility for the hooliganism of the 19th of October 2019 and the 6th of March 2020. That is my considered opinion, and I feel that those are the people, not for the GMSA to apologize, it's for the PPP to apologize for causing such terror to the two ministers, Minister Karen Cummings and David Patterson, and also for, I think it gave the Guyana a bad name. It gave Guyana a bad name. Those persons in the public who like to criticize other parties, the WP or the PNC, but look carefully at what was taking place inside the auditorium of Pegasus and outside on the streets of High Street, and see who the hooligans are. And you will see that this is a PPP show, start, duration, and termination.
Thank you so much for that. As we move to the final question for tonight, we're talking about hooliganism, the PPP's hooliganism. Lots and lots of hooliganism over the years. President Granger spoke earlier about Babu John, and they used that platform, the mention of what Jack Dale said, to divide up the country. And I just mentioned that because we will hear more about Babu John's skit, so to speak, in the coming days. More on that you guys will read. President Granger, our final question for tonight. How did the PPP imagine that its display of hooliganism could serve a common good?
I do not think, that the PPP understands what a common good is. If they ever did, the events of the last decade, from 2015 to 2025, indicate that the only good they're concerned about is what's good to the PPP. And I think that they feel that by a combination of inducement and force, they could win a substantial part of the population and create some form of authoritarian regime, in the sense that they threaten in plain language that they want to take control of the whole country, take control of every village, Afro-Guyanese villages, take control of American village, control. PPP doesn't talk about common good, they talk about control. And I think this is what you have to understand in dealing with the PPP. So it didn't think that in being hooliganistic or breaching, behaving in a disorderly manner, it could harm the common good, because they felt that they had the numbers on their side. And you can see that in recent months, they've been able to use various means to get people who are disaffected with other parties to come over to their side. So they may be telling themselves that this is working, their strategy is working, but in effect, hooliganism is counterproductive in the long term. This is exactly what the PPP tried in 1964. They use terror, they use terrorism, they use violence, they use murder, they use arson, feeling that once they have a majority support in the polls, they can get away with it. Unfortunately, many Guyanese have been swayed by that type of argument, and Guyana, as a result, became a very unhappy place. So it is not a question of common good. It's a question of what's good to the PPP. Take it or leave it. And this is the attitude you see in the villages. This is the attitude you see in the Armenian villages, the attitude you see in African villages, what you see in the Indian villages as well. And it is a very it's unsavory development. People are now becoming accustomed to certain language, to certain rants. And when they hear that, they become quite dismissive. Oh, that's how the man talks all the time. We've had situations in which a head of state or former head of state is being called before the court for offensive language, and it seems that nobody is really concerned, or people who are concerned are not speaking up. And they're shouted into silence, they're shamed and embarrassed, and it is difficult for people of goodwill, of moderate temperament, to really go through this every week, every month of the year. And after a while, people just migrate or keep quiet. And it's not a healthy development. It's not a healthy democracy. And I think that what has happened in that 10-year period between 2015 and 2025, in the courts, at Babu John, press conferences, in the streets, the hooliganism, I think these have seriously damaged, Guyana's credibility in the international democratic community. And I think in the long term, we will lose. People will continue to migrate, and people will continue to regard Guyana as an unhappy and unpleasant place. So I don't think, anyone in the PPP was really considering the common good. This type of vulgarity, this type of hooliganism doesn't have place in democratic society. I mean, I don't want to make comparisons with European and other countries, but even in third world countries, Singapore, you don't see this sort of thing happening. It's just vulgar. It's just it's not something that you put in your grade 6 students' textbooks and say this is normal political action. This is abnormal in the extreme. It's very sad. It's very sad that we have serious members of society aligning themselves with the PPP to create this type of mayhem. Very sad. Nothing to do with the common good. It has everything to do with vulgarity and hooliganism.
Well said. Everything. The evidence is there. Vulgarity, hooliganism. It's just there. Sometimes we wonder the future of Guyana, especially with this sort of blatant hooliganism by the PPP regime, disorderly public behavior, disrespect for the rights of others, and its total disregard for norms of civil social conduct. We see that every single day, no regards, absolutely none. All right, folks, that's enough. You've seen the hooliganism, you've seen the intellectual authors behind acts of hooliganism, what is said to be who are said to be the intellectual authors. We see it every day. President Granger, thank you so much for your time, as always, right here on 107.1 FM, and to share your time with us as well. We thank And we appreciate that. And we really do miss those beautiful days from 2015 to 2020. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
It's a pleasure being on Anansi Web Education, and let us hope that this program would contribute to making Guyana a better place for our children and for future generations, and for serving the common good. I think the program is very important to bring these factual episodes into their homes so people could remember and think about the future. Say, is this the country you want to bring up your children in? Is this the good life that we promised? And Guyanese must think about these things and think about the future. So thank you, and may God bless this program, Anansi Web Education, and continue to bring education to the Guyanese people. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you so much. And to all of our listeners as well, God bless all of you. We are out of here. Until next time, take care.
Come and hear this sweet story that tell the people about life in the country. All day I back down, me now I come home. In a jackass yard to fetch the load. Cockle shy hand, bag over shoulder, running by his side, a Rexy and Rover. From the farm, them a come. Son, I go down, but up the river.